the best part about the 18 years, nearly 20 years now being in the financial services industry is once you learn how to spend your money to protect and grow your money, becoming wealthy is only a matter of time. And time is something money cannot buy. Think about this for a second. If a 90-year-old person worth, let's say, $10 million offered to trade places with you permanently, would you do it? Of course you wouldn't. Why? Because time is more valuable than money, which is why becoming financially free and independent is imperative to enjoy all that life has to offer. No one's going to remember your fancy job title or how much your corporate job paid you or the car you bought. People will remember the time you spent with them, the fun times you had, and the places you traveled to. Real wealth is time and the freedom to do whatever it is you want to do. And we hope here on the Make Your Money Matter show and here at One Capital Management to help you get there. Warren Buffett actually calls it the fear-greed cycle. It's a cycle that we get stuck on. Fear, greed, fear, greed, just keeps going. And if you've heard anything about Warren Buffett, he's got a lot of quotes around this, and people without a financial plan that I've noticed don't really know how to react to uncertainties. So here's what's going on in the market in general, okay? This is kind of a breakdown, if you will, between what's happening, what they say, and then what happens next. Let me give you an example, right? The market is at an all-time high. That's what's happening. Let's say end of 2021, all of 2021 for the most part, right? If you think about that year, for example, what's happening is the market is at an all-time high. What they're saying is stocks are overvalued. A crash is coming. Has to happen, has to come, right? And what happens next? The market typically goes up. It's kind of how it works, right? Now let's take the inverse of that. What's happening? The market has dropped, more like the early part of 2022. What they're saying is this is the big one. The worst is yet to come. What happens next? The market tends to go up. Just look at history. Sometimes investments work out and sometimes they don't. That's just reality. The purpose of taking risks is to what? Generate a return on one's money. So an investor who spends an enormous amount of time searching for the perfect investment opportunity, namely one that provides high returns with no risk, is actually a fruitless pursuit. It's a unicorn. It doesn't exist. It's far better to spend time developing a strategy that provides a high probability of achieving an investor's financial objectives. And this is done by clearly defining your goals and your risk profile, and then outlining an overall asset allocation and a sensible plan to get you there. Now, I'm not talking about some sensible plan like you buy a car and, oh, that's a sensible option. It's okay to want the Range Rover. I'm not saying you shouldn't want that Range Rover in your portfolio, but understanding that you need to build out your planning with some sensible items in there so that you're not just sitting on the sidelines waiting for not only the perfect time, but also the perfect investment. Let's start with some basics here first. First and foremost, know how much you owe. That's number one. Make a list of your debt, including the creditors, the total amount of it that you owe, and then the monthly payments. Figure out your debt list first. Having all the debts in front of you will allow you to see the bigger picture and, I guess, stay aware of your overall complete debt picture. Next, number two, I would say, is pay your bills on time. I know that sounds like super simple, but that's one of the biggest items when it comes to affecting your credit score. Late payments, they all make it harder to pay off your debt. So you're ultimately have to pay the payment and then a late fee. So make sure to pay that on time. Atlantis was the most advanced civilization of its day, technologically way ahead of all the others, and militarily all the powers more than others. And it was basically an empire hell-bent on growth and expansion, ultimately world domination. But that myopic view proved to be its downfall. You see, Atlantis had no vision of self-preservation or sustainability. Its only concern was with what? Growth, growth, growth. And from the collision of those two opposing objectives, growth versus sustainability, Plato wanted to teach us lessons and in other areas of our lives, essentially. And in today's world, one of those areas can certainly be for preparing for retirement, back to our original topic of today's episode. And around the question in particular is, how much can I receive from my investments? And the bridge I'm trying to make there is that we may have fear going into retirement, being in this accumulation phase, this growth phase, and we need to take the other side of the coin on this one. We need to understand that ultimately, at some point, we're going to go from attributing and contributing to asset buildup to ultimately distributing. There were two economists in 1972. Their names were Robert Hogan and James Hines. And they actually went through a study and proved in their own data that higher risk doesn't necessarily mean higher reward. They concluded that over time, and I quote, stock portfolios with lesser volatility have experienced greater average returns than their riskier counterparts. And I mention this because we focus a lot on having balanced portfolios and having active management. And really what I call, when I talk to my military clients and my first responders, I call it protecting your six. It's when you protect your downside, protect what can harm you. So when you see markets right now going down 20%, heading towards bear or in bear territory, but average portfolios from an active manager are down maybe half of that, you look at that and you kind of go, and I mentioned this before, I had a client one time tell me you sucked less than most. I remember thinking that was like a really weird backhanded compliment, but it basically proved managing risk. And a good portfolio manager, anyone who's out there seeking advice and portfolio management, should really find a good risk manager. What has happened in the past 40 years? We've gone through 6 recessions, 5 bear markets, 41 federal rate hikes, a dot-com bubble, Black Monday in the 80s, 2 50% stock market crashes. We've gone through 12 plus US involved wars, a global pandemic. We've had impeached presidents, the great financial crisis of '08. That was all in 40 years. So it's interesting to note when we talk about protecting from volatile markets, and a lot of it's been kicked up this year with 2022's inflation and supply chain issues and all those kind of things. If you just look past the 40 years, we've gone through a lot of these crises before. If they come out here and officially, if everyone just agreed that we are all in a recession, and then we all just agreed, which technically, again, by the rule of thumb, we are, does it matter? And here's what I mean by that. Does it change the way you actually think about what's already happened this year? Did it change the fact that months ago you started paying more for gas? Did it change the fact that milk and eggs and basically everything we're buying nowadays at the grocery store has gone up? No. So in a weird way, and I'm gonna just openly say this, I'm almost like, you know what? Let's just say we're in a recession. Let's all just label it. It's not a bad thing though to want more for you and your loved ones. That's called caring for those around you and being prudent with the gifts you've been given. So when we tell ourselves this one myth, we shouldn't want more than we have. We sometimes tend to settle for less. There's a big conversation I have with my family, with my kids, and within our own Bible study, in fact. And we talk about this, a lot of the difference between being content and being complacent. And we may be tricking ourselves into thinking it's okay that we're not doing something or enough to improve our financial situation. And this money myth, I think, holds us back, in my opinion. And it can make it hard to actually improve our financial behaviors. And when we frame wanting more as a positive motivator, it can be easier to take the chances or do the work. That's what I really want to focus on. Do the work needed to get to that next financial level that you may want or need. According to Yahoo Finance, Americans are delaying retirement and 64% of them will retire broke. Crazy. Now it's predicted that another 19% will retire with less than $10,000. Friends, as a financial advisor for nearly 20 years, this is why I do this show. This is the kind of stats that I read every week that makes me so sad because I know we can help ourselves with the right knowledge and the right stewardship that I want to provide for our clients here at One Capital Management and for you watching and listening here on the Make Your Money Matter show. So that 19% of people who will retire with less than $10,000, my heart bleeds for them because I want them to hear this show, to hear an advisor who actually cares, to make sure they don't become a statistic in that environment. Now, this all paints a grim picture for retirement, right? Now, if you're not careful, that can be you. I hear a lot of people calling from the show, from the radio program, and say, Brad, you know, I don't like the market. I'm scared of it. And to me, and why I wanted to talk about today's show was it's really more about understanding. Think about this. Human nature is very simple. We don't like what we don't understand. And so if you take that into the world of market, for example, we may say we don't like the market. We may say we have a fear of it, but what we're really saying is, I don't truly understand it. Wouldn't you agree? And so if you think about that, when you find counsel or an advisor, it's not just offloading the investment work, it's actually an educator. It's someone to help you understand the market for yourself. I share this a lot with clients. When we work with a client, we're more partnering with them to manage their money, manage their risk, manage their planning. It's not a dictatorship here. It's a discussion. I think a lot of advisors take that approach. They'll kind of say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put in this program. We'll follow this investment model, and so on and so forth. The reality is it's the client's money. It's their life they're trying to detail out. Our job is to be the right artist for them, to understand what the goal is about it and paint the picture that suits their goals, their objectives, their needs, their wants, everything, encompassing their fears. It has been said the cost of inaction is almost always greater than the cost of a mistake. It reminds me, I think, of the Teddy Roosevelt quote, which I always loved: a man who never makes a mistake is a man who's never done anything. Solomon, again, the wisest man in my world, actually wrote about this in his book of Ecclesiastes. He said, because life has no guarantees, we have to be prepared. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, that's where planning comes in. We can't, and no one can, guarantee a rate of return. And by the way, if anyone does, please run. But investing does have risks. You can't guarantee if you plan for something, it's going to play out exactly how you planned it, but you have a plan to back up on managing that risk. And what a risk manager really does is really what a portfolio manager does. We are risk managers.